We'll start with the breaking news just come in this morning that the asylum seeker convicted of a child sex offence who had been mistakenly released from prison at the end of last week has now been removed from the country. The Home Secretary Shabana's mood says, "I've pulled every lever to deport Mr Kebatu and remove him off British soil. I'm pleased to confirm this this vile child sex offender has been deported. He's returned to Ethiopia." I mean, I presume this means often people leave the country through a voluntary agreement. I presume this means the Home Secretary has legally required him to exit the UK. And does it start to repair some of the damage from that terrible blunder last Friday?
I think it was his preferred choice, actually, when he was mistakenly led from prison. He actually wanted to go home to Ethiopia, but it is a full stop on what has been a Monty Python-esque kind of shambles that has shown up with a tragedy behind it. You know, the young 14-year-old girl assaulted by him, and very frightening experience. But at last, there's a full stop. The system has proved that it can fix something. Because to free of all the people, you know, of all the gin joints in all the world, of all the prisoners, a man who sparked summer protests, bordering on riots, for prison officers to just think, hey, we'll let you out, mate. And then he wanders around London for a couple of days where there's more CCTV than anything else. And then finally is picked up in North London. It just was such a sorry episode that it's good that it's over. But there's no great sort of pat on the back for anyone.
Just to pick up on that point, Guito, if he was saying before he was released last Friday that he wanted to return to Ethiopia, that it was a facilitated return, normally in those circumstances he would be paid some money to leave. But presumably now, if he's being deported, the tone of the Home Secretary's statement sounds like he's not getting that normal payment of some thousands of pounds to return. Yeah,
I don't know. We'll find out. It's a good question. A good question, isn't it? But, you know, there'll be outrage if that has happened. But the good news is that something that should have never happened in the first place has finally been fixed. No great pat on the back for anyone, but at least they've actually managed to sort of undo it.
No, and David Lammy's been saying we've introduced the strictest checks ever seen in our prison system to stop similar unacceptable errors in future. I mean, Nels, there's no doubt this was a huge embarrassment, wasn't it? Do you think this is matter over now? I mean, obviously the government will be hoping that everyone will forget about it and move on, but do you think that will be the case?
Well, where there's an error, we have to understand the error too. We have to make sure there's some degree of review, so there's no repetition of the actual...
And there is a review being conducted now.
And so that has to be done. So we have to find out how this actually happened. Because, of course, as Guito actually rightfully pointed out, of all prisoners who could have mistakenly released, or so we released the one who was the most high-profile, contentious prisoner in the actual nation at this particular moment. But so how did this happen? And it shatters confidence in the actual system. So it was later after the fact. I thought this was just a one-off. I didn't know that we have a bit of a habit, not too broad a habit, but accidentally releasing prisoners is not the one-off occasion that's actually that we've...
There's about 280 a year or something.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Really quite shocking.
So Dame Lynn Owens is looking at this case, but hopefully she'll be looking at this case and whether this is a rare case or why there are 279 others in the average year. Well, she's a former Met police officer, but very experienced police officer.
It speaks to the fact that maybe our prisons might be overstretched. I remember there was a story in the Telegraph yesterday that we're reliant on migrant workers from West Africa coming into Britain to help prop up the actual prison service. So that speaks to the fact that, look, our prison service is overstretched. Maybe there might be a pay issue there too. But there's something wrong with the system that over 200 prisoners per year are being accidentally released in Britain. A nation that's renowned for its efficiency and our systems and our controls. I'm shocked.
And Guito, do you think this feeds into that whole kind of public perception of things being a bit broken with this country?
No doubt at all. It's one of those, you can't organise the proverbial in a brewery, is what people sort of think when, you know, and we have images of this. So this guy is not, you know, wasn't running away or anything. He literally was languishing outside the prison thinking, what do I do now? And they said, just go away, go away.
According to a lorry driver who was actually delivering a fridge, he was asking people where he's meant to go to, that he had no idea for more than 90... it was actually quite a while. He was walking around the prison...
And going back and
saying,
checking.
Where do I go to? And they just said, well, he said, I'm getting deported. Where do I... He had no idea what he was doing.
And let's not forget, it was thanks to a member of the public,
Indeed.
Actually, that he was caught in the end, wasn't it?
Not all this CCTV that's watching us everywhere.
Yeah. No, none of the...
On the other side of the ledger, we're reporting from the Home Office this morning a big rise in the last year of enforcement visits. This is people who are working illegally and the Home Office inspectors arriving to tackle those illegal employers and to say that you shouldn't be employing people illegally in this way. I think I'm right in saying a 38% rise on the previous 12-month period of those visits, and the highest level since records began 15 years ago. So it looks like on illegal workers, they are trying to crack down with the cooperation of Deliveroo and other employers who are now doing tougher checks. So there is something going on.
There is indeed. Some of this does look like a stunt. I was walking down a high street not long ago and they had a slew of delivery drivers all lined up and they were checking their papers and their IDs and everything else. It was an air-defying sight, but I understand there's a purpose for it altogether too. I do shiver a little bit about the concept of what an illegal boss is, because an illegal employer might be. Because we're all employers right nowadays. If you employ a builder or so, do you check their papers? With somebody, or a plumber, do you check their papers to make sure that they've got legal status in the country? You might pay them cash over hand. Who knows, or so, your barber. There might be many different...
The law says it is your obligation, if you have a cleaner in your house, to know their employment, their visa status.
So how many
and
people...
also to make sure that you've taken seriously your tax obligations.
Absolutely.
So you have to check that, yeah.
Well, OK, fair enough then. Well, I'll put it to you like this then. That might be news to a lot of people this morning. So, yeah, that might
that
be
is the law.
And 5 years in prison or an unlimited fine is the penalty. So it's quite serious. But I think they're chasing employers, really, aren't they? And the only thing that worries me is, again, they're going possibly for the easy targets. They're raiding a nail bar and they're arresting a whole load of people who are just sitting there sort of working flat out for 10 hours a day. Whereas I think for most people, when they're worried about illegal migrants, they're worried about young men standing idly on the corner of the street with malintent. They're not as worried, I don't think.
Well, and if they're not working, though, isn't that more likely to happen? I mean, if people who come here, I mean, I know, Nels, you were talking about the fact that actually when people come here, should we be allowing them to work? Because at least then they're giving something back, they're doing something.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, obviously, yes, it's a good thing that we're cracking down on illegal working, but at the same time, what are these people then going to do?
Well, then if you are not legally permitted to work, it puts some degree of question about why are you here. It puts some question over there. So that means there's a problem with your status over here right now. So that puts you further into the system. The problem that we then have, again, becomes one of which are we, as I keep saying, are we taking advantage of a potential opportunity as we see it also, or are we just holding people up and feeding the masses something that might be providing a bit of a bloodlust or so in terms of, hey, we're showing you a parade of people who are working legally, we've taken them off the market.
But I would say, Guto, if you have people who are in a hotel waiting for their asylum seeker claim to be processed, they don't have the right to work at this stage, they have no visa status, if they are being paid to be a Deliveroo driver or an Uber Eats driver, and they are arriving and knocking on people's doors to deliver food without any of the proper checks, I think people would be worried about that. And the fact that those employers, Deliveroo, Uber Eats, have now cooperated with the government in the last year to improve those checks, I would think that's an important thing to do. That's not just a nail bar, it's somebody arriving in the dark at your front door.
Yeah, and I think in that sense it's good. I don't think we need ID cards, by the way. If you just require a national insurance number, that would take care of this. But it's going to be used as an excuse to bring in ID cards. But that's for another day. I think what it does show, to be fair, is that there's a new Home Secretary, and she is determined every day. I imagine she goes in and says, right, what are we going to do today? So we're going to crack down illegal working. What are we going to do? We're going to get that guy back to Ethiopia. What are we going to do tomorrow? And it feels like somebody's cracking the whip at last.
It's not tackling the main issue, though, is it still, which is this number of people arriving by small boats. This has now reached 36,954. That was the last data that they had for October the 26th. And that has now beaten the entire number, the whole total for 2024. So it's still not stopping the issue of people illegally coming across the channel.
Well, I don't think they can do that without a massive disincentive. And that's, whatever its flaws, that was the idea behind the Rwanda plan, that if you cross the channel from a safe place called France, lots of things wrong with France, but it's essentially a safe place to cross from, you end up in Rwanda or somewhere else. And I think in the end,
how many ended up in Rwanda?
To come back.
How many ended up?
Well, yeah, because
I think it was 4, and they were all paid to go.
Because the policy was never given a chance to work. And what they're discovering, and thank God Shabana Mahmood is a qualified lawyer, she's discovering that it's very hard to do anything in the Home Office. You're wading through treacle. And you've got human rights lawyers like the Prime Minister who's getting in the way of the policy of the elected government of the day. That's what killed the Rwanda policy.
To be fair to Keir Starmer, this crackdown on illegal working and these visits is the year to September. So it's his first year of Prime Minister before Shabana Mahmood became the Home Secretary, just to be fair to him.
Can I just point something out? So 36,954 people have crossed the... have come over in the small boats. How many of those 36,954 stories have you heard? Up until you've heard none. You've probably not heard from one of those people whatsoever, and we never get to hear their stories, because I feel that if we actually heard why these people are taking such a risky route to get here, it would create some degree of empathy that would actually make us rethink how we're approaching this as a policy too. Because look, it is insane for you to... I've heard of children dying on that route too. It's insane for you. I hate catching the ferry or any form of boat whatsoever, let alone getting in some sort of rubber dinghy and then risking your life and really risking actually just ending up in the water.
But then that's what the asylum process is there for, isn't it? To assess everybody's claim to come here and to look at it.
But at the same time, too, I do feel that there's something that's happened with the idea, even to how we term the term that we use for it, small boats, where we almost disassociate it from people, from actual people. So I feel that it would be amazing if we start to hear more about why is this happening, because we make a lot of assumptions about it, but why don't we actually hear their stories about, why don't we hear from these people, hear their stories about why are you doing this, why is this happening? Because I get it, Britain is a rich, safe country or so, and we're a great country, and by nature of that alone, we're going to be a bit of a magnet for
so
people.
there are a certain percentages that are economic migrants.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe we're in economic destitution. All of us would be economic migrants, so that's a natural thing. There's nothing inherently abnormal about that. The key thing about I challenge us to do now is to let's hear from them. Let's hear from them in their own words. Because what's going to happen is that today they're none people. Tomorrow, 1, maybe 2, maybe 10 of them or so might become something phenomenal in our country. Or so, be it like a Sir Mo Salah or something else like that. And did I get it right? I think I got it right. Yeah, the runner, not the football player. Sorry, I just want to make sure I got those right. So one of them will become something, and then we'll look back and realise, actually, maybe there was an opportunity there that we could have taken advantage of. I don't want us to look back. I want us to look forward and see how we can actually take advantage of this situation and try and humanise these people, mainstream them, bring them into our society.
And you know what? I have a lot of sympathy for that in general, but the problem with the people in the small boats is they're queue jumping. There are women and children sitting in refugee camps who would like to, and they go through the process of applying to come here legally, and their place is taken up, because we can't take everyone, by young men jumping in boats, and they are largely young men. When you see the pictures now, they're almost invariably young men, fit and active. I don't sort of criticise them for trying, but we can't have that. It's queue jumping. It's taking the place of people who are trying to do it the right way.
And it undermines public confidence.
Yes,
in
if we can't control our borders,
generally.
we can't control our streets. If we can't control our streets, and if we let rogue people out of prisons, then people think, God, no wonder we can't run the NHS, and we've got 2.8 million people.
It makes it much harder to tell the stories.
Everything goes down.
No, I completely agree with that, totally. I actually think it's the risky nature of the route is nuts, that we have to find a way to make sure that business model, and there are smugglers there, and that business model does have to be smashed. I think that has to be smashed on two fronts. Number one, the creation of migrants, of refugees, or so, in this desperate situation, that model which we're implicit in, we're complicit in, or so, we have to smash that model. And then the actual route itself, when people are getting on those boats and the smugglers on the other side, that model also has to be smashed.
Yeah, but that's not as easy. I mean, that's what Keir Starmer said about smashing the gangs, but that's proved more difficult, hasn't it?
Far too often, we are the gang. Far too often, we are causing these situations too. So when you see things like, hey, Britain, and we're very gung-ho when it comes to these things, Libya, for example, you'll not find a more gung-ho country. We often use the term, we're going to lead the world in this, that, something else. So we run into Libya, we create a boom in the migration crisis. So Gaddafi, as evil and horrible a man as he was, I never liked him, he actually kept a bit of a firewall of migration on that, coming through Libya over there. So there was actually a firewall over there, and he did it on behalf of the Europeans, and they were paying him.
But when sure you're going to sustain the argument, we are the gangs, Nell.
The British
people, the British government is facilitating, we are planning, we are smuggling, we're trying to break our own laws, we're trying to get them in on boats.
But that depends
we are the gangs,
No, that depends on how you're defining the gang. If you're defining the gang as the person who put the person on the boat, yes, of course we're not the gang. If you're defining the gang as the person who actually flies the bomber over bomber over to Libya and other places so, and decimates the country and creates a magnificent route. Because look, this didn't come out of nowhere. Creates a magnificent route for migrations or so, people to actually people fleeing destitution or people fleeing that actual place that we've recently bombed. Then of course we're part of the gang.
One interesting take on Rwanda. I remember going there, seeing where the migrants would have been sent, and hearing the president of that country say, one of the things you miss is that Africa needs these fit, ambitious, healthy young men.
Africa's flooded with fit, ambitious, healthy young men.
Yeah, he says you taking them and say and let them languishing in sort of Deliveroo jobs here. He was saying Rwanda is growing. Most of the countries in the Commonwealth are growing faster than the UK is now.
Can I just point something out there?
So it's not an answer for
I'm going to move on, but actually not in a way which stops you making your next point.
OK.
Because just standing back a little bit, looking at the politics, we've got Guito here.
Yep.
Welsh heritage.
Yep.
6 days on from the catastrophic Caerphilly by-election. You have a Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, under huge pressure because of that political loss, but also all this mess in the asylum immigration system. And now the news, in the latest opinion polling, when asked, people say they prefer the idea of a Nigel Farage Prime Ministership to Keir Starmer.
So 33% polled by Ipsos says Farage is a better candidate to lead the country compared with 30% for Sir Keir Starmer. And Labour is now its lowest ever in the polls, rating falling to just 17% of the vote. I mean, that's not going to be good news, is it?
It's not going good.
No, and I mean, in the end, you know, you like to think that somebody is good because they're in a hotly contested field. In sport, if you're the best footballer or you're the best rugby player, you've got a lot of people you compete against. Nigel Farage is doing well because he's up against pretty poor opposition, and this is more a reflection of what a dire Prime Minister Keir Starmer's turned out to be. I spoke to somebody yesterday who said, I knew he was never going to be charismatic, I knew he was never going to be a successful campaigner, but I thought behind closed doors he'd be a good man running government. He's not. He's not able to do that. So the question arises, what is the point of him? And since you mentioned Caerphilly, you know, it's one of those where Caerphilly has never, ever been anything other than Labour. South Wales is where Labour got its first seat, a man called Keir Hardie, a long time ago, and has been Labour throughout. I grew up there, sort of oppressive. It's a one-party state. But they collapsed, their vote collapsed. And if you can't win in Caerphilly and you can't win in Wales, then you ain't going to win in Kensington, Chelsea and Sedgefield and all kinds of places where there are currently Labour MPs. So if I was a Labour MP now, I'd be thinking, as Tory MPs are a bit too trigger-happy to do, is this my man? And if he's not, you know, why am I going to stick with him for another 3 years? And I think come next May, when there's a massacre of the Labour Party, whoever benefits, Plaid Cymru or Reform in South Wales, won't be the Conservatives, got to concede that. I think there'll be questions that will push Keir over the edge. I think he's dead man walking.
Well, and Nels, you know, conversation's already turned back to Andy Burnham. He's been mentioned in this poll. Ipsos's monthly tracker of political preferences shows that Andy Burnham is favoured over Sir Keir as a better Prime Minister. Do you think it is time to make that change sooner rather than later?
I don't know if sooner is the right idea. So I think that what could happen is that Keir Starmer does the really unpopular stuff and holds the fort just to get the unpopular stuff out the way, and then for the Labour to rescue themselves. So Andy Burnham is going to have to come in like our knight in shining, like the knight in shining armour or so in that situation. Can I just point something out to you too about Farage in this way? I'm not going to bash Nigel Farage because he bashes back, and I don't want to get into a fight with him at all. It's quite clear. But there was a really interesting New York Times article about him. I'm just going to read the title for you. Could this unserious, mischievous, frightening man be Britain's next Prime Minister? And it was about a 1,000-word piece on Nigel Farage, chronicling his history, chronicling his Trumpism, chronicling the impact it will probably have on Britain, chronicling, really taking a critical look at him, the way that we probably wouldn't go near as much as, say, in British media right now, certainly British print media. And I find it pretty interesting that the Americans are really onto his number, calling him out with a bit more gusto and speaking with a lot more clarity on Nigel Farage's politics. And really, I'm not that impressed. I'm wrong.
I think Nigel Farage will love the idea of being attacked by the New York Times. He'll be really popular.
Badge of honour. He's probably put it up on his wall.
Maybe he has.
But what is he thinking? What is he thinking? What's Kemi Badenoch thinking about? You know, we have in the papers today Michael Heseltine, John Major, and Theresa May. Two former Prime Ministers and a former Deputy Prime Minister, all saying to the Tories, whatever you do, don't listen to Geeta Harry and get into a deal between Reform and the Conservative Party,
I'm not
would be.
suggesting that. No, I wouldn't
I thought
suggest that in a million years.
I thought you were hinting at it a moment ago.
No, I think that the tragic mistake of Kemi Badenoch is to imitate Reform, to be a pale reflection. That's not quite right in this context, but a pale reflection of Reform. That way lies ruin. Right. That way lies ruin. The Conservative Party is a proud tradition that, incidentally, has been extremely, extremely successful at winning elections when it's been at the sweet spot, at the heart of British politics, offering to balance the books, run the economy well, and deliver.
The reason why I was wondering is because all these Boris Johnson supporters, like, you know, Nadine Dorries and Andrea Jenkins, they've all been jumping over to Farage. And I just assumed that you, as another loyal Boris Johnson supporter, you'd be jumping into you are bucking the Boris Johnson trend, are you?
Well, you actually know that I disagreed ferociously with him over Brexit. So, you know, not all Boris supporters. But I think what we miss at the heart of British politics at the moment is somebody with a connection with the masses and with an irrepressible belief that Britain deserves to be better than this, and has high ambitions to leave the country in a better state than he found it. That is the Boris Johnson that I worked for as Mayor of London, and that's the Boris Johnson who would have tried to sort of deliver that if Brexit, his own fault on that, and a global pandemic hadn't gone in the way.
And you just said, Keir Starmer, you said, can't turn it round. He's going to have to go after the disastrous local
Just imagine
elections.
Wes Streeting going head-to-head with Nigel Farage.
But when
it would be different.
But when you have disastrous local elections next May for the Conservatives, which it looks like will be equally disastrous for Kemi Badenoch, is she also in the same position where she needs to...
The two of them will be sitting in the departure lounge together.
So we could see a whole different
saying that Boris Johnson should be returning to kind of...
That's not going to happen. I don't know who's
but it's what you would like to happen.
I actually wouldn't put money against that, truth be told. Because I still think that if you look at the riders and riders, so apparently there's a website that emerged yesterday called lambforleader.com, which is, of course, meant to be Katie Lamb, who is this 30...
Lamb for the slaughter.
Yeah, Lamb for the slaughter, very good. Who said some really racy, interesting stuff about race.
Well, she's definitely leaning towards Reform.
But she's leaning towards overthrowing Kemi, is the way it would look like, or so. And then Robert Jenrick is clearly running and riding, or so. I've heard whispers about him actually raising money all this time too. And then of course, Kemi herself will probably still want to stay in the race. It's not going to work for her in the slightest bit. But I still think if you look at them, and you look at the landscape of the Conservative Party and who could actually really lead the Conservative Party to some form of success, Boris Johnson still remains the brightest star there. By some, I don't know how we get back into Parliament, because I think there's a by-election or something else right now, then Reform probably...
You can always do that. I mean, I'll say it again. There is a Boris-shaped hole at the heart of British politics, but that relationship between him and the Conservative Party was always an abusive one. Neither really ever liked the other. And he was not beaten by Keir Starmer. He was destroyed by the Conservative Party. And if we had a presidential system, there might be a way back.
Well.
But who pulled the plug on him? It was his own party, not the electorate, not Keir Starmer.
So in a year's time, Wes Streeting, in the Geeta Harry world, Wes Streeting has emerged as the Labour leader. Who is he going to be up against in the Conservatives? Nigel Farage for Reform, Wes Streeting for Labour.
I'd be very happy to see someone like James Cleverly, back there. A man who walks in here and he makes you smile, and when his lips are moving, you think, this guy's making sense. That's not a bad start in modern politics at the moment. And I think Nigel Farage would start looking like the freak he is if you had two normal people at the heart.
So James Cleverly for damage control, essentially, as opposed to for success.
Well, I think he's a good guy. He could do better. But
he made the best speech.
Here's what's funny is that the biggest threat to the Conservative Party is actually the Conservative Party's membership, because James Cleverly probably would be a good idea, but he wouldn't actually win. He wouldn't win a member. He wouldn't win
I think
a
if
poll
he'd
with the
have got
members.
to the membership,
against Jenrick or Badenoch?
Yeah.
No, he'd have got slaughtered.
Can I move things on? Talking of damage control, another situation, obviously, that's still rumbling on is the situation with Prince Andrew. There's this talk of how to get him out of Royal Lodge, how to manage the situation. Is the King taking strong enough action? We understand now Prince William's reportedly turned to new methods in an attempt to get Andrew to leave the Royal Lodge. And this is according to the Newsagents podcast hosted by Emily Maitlis. We understand that William's potentially threatened his cousins, Princess Eugenie and Princess Beatrice, with the removal of their titles if Andrew doesn't give up the lease on this house. This is according to suggestions that it was said you've got to get your dad to move out of Royal Lodge. I mean, is this William getting frustrated by the lack of action in this situation, do we think?
I'm going to operate on for humanity purposes, I'm going to operate on the assumption that this story is not true. I really hope it's so, because I wouldn't like to see William as being that ruthless towards his cousins. Because if you're that ruthless towards your cousins, who else are you going to be ruthless towards? So we're all safe from Prince William, but I like to think that they're your little cousins. You've got to be a little bit nicer to them than that. Then
you are
your
the
dad
nice
doesn't.
guy today.
No, I'm not now. I just can't feel. I have cousins. I have plenty of cousins, and I really couldn't fathom the idea
Kings
that.
have to be a bit ruthless.
Yeah.
Well, but not entirely. Not in today's day and age. No, your job is to wave, not to be ruthless.
But then if there's something
Where we
that's
started, we
potentially
cannot
damaging
organise
to
the
the monarchy.
proverbial in a brewery. The king cannot get his own brother to move out of the palace in the grounds of his
Which, by the way,
own
the king's
castle.
paying for.
Yeah, which he's paying for. It's beyond parody. And I also think there's a parallel universe where actually moving from one luxury home on a sort of, exclusive estate to another is seen as punishment for associating with a
fewer
paedophile.
rooms.
It's sort of like, oh, you can't have a Maserati, but you can have a Porsche. No, he should actually be banished into a sort of, old banger. Yeah. So he should be banished off all royal estates, I'd have thought. If I was him, I'd leave the country.
If I was Prince Andrew, I'd be a friend unto myself, and I'll probably do the Idi Amin thing and quietly leave the country, and you'll never hear from me ever again. And that would be that. Go into exile somewhere nice, somewhere quiet, also
somewhere sunny, where there's other people like you.
And also,
well, he does have a palace at his disposal, doesn't he? We understand.
Yeah,
so.
we do understand that. But it's also looking like, because things are getting increasingly. The first it was the titles, then it was the actual house. Eventually, if he's not careful, it'll be his freedom if he's not too careful about it. I wouldn't, because it's never going to be enough. The punishment's never going to be enough right now, and it's going to reach the point where it's like, okay, why is this man even free?
And we didn't even have a chance to talk about whether we should be petting rabbits.
I know.
We'll have to come back to that when you return
later
on
in
the
show.
Love to Jamaica. Well, we love to Jamaica. Really wish them the best.
Thank you,
Absolutely. We're keeping
a
close eye on the situation there after Hurricane Melissa. Thanks both very much. We'll see you later.